When your husband decides to announce your marriage is over via text, you'd expect at least a crying jag. Instead, I laughed so hard I snorted coffee all over my nurse's scrubs. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had just spent 12 hours saving lives, only to have mine dismissed by a man who couldn't even spell incompatible correctly in his breakup message. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Caroline Davis, and I'm a cardiac nurse at St. Cecilia's Hospital. At 34, I've seen enough hearts stop and start to know when something's flatlined for good. What I didn't expect was for my 8-year marriage to Michael Bennett to end with the clinical precision of a medical chart note. This isn't working anymore. I'm staying at Julia's. We need space to figure things out. Julia. Of course it was Julia Whitman from his consulting firm, the ambitious little blonde who'd been calling our house at odd hours for urgent project updates. The same Julia who'd somehow needed Michael's personal attention during our anniversary dinner last month, causing him to step outside for 45 minutes while I sat alone with my cooling steak. I stared at the text message, sitting in the hospital break room after pulling a double shift. Mrs. Henderson in room 304 had coded twice during my shift, and both times I'd helped bring her back. The bitter irony of saving lives while my own fell apart wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Michael. Can we talk about this like adults? I typed back, adults don't end marriages via text. Your stuff will be on the curb by Thursday. Have Julia help you carry it. Then I turned off my phone. The drive home to our upscale apartment in Davis Heights felt surreal. Our neighborhood was one of those places where everyone knew everyone else's business, where perfectly manicured lawns competed for HOA approval, and gossip spread faster than a cardiac arrhythmia. I pulled into our driveway, my driveway now I supposed, and sat in my Honda Civic next to Michael's empty parking spot. His BMW was probably parked outside Julia's trendy loft downtown, the one she'd mentioned during the company Christmas party when she'd had too much wine and gotten a little too friendly with my husband. Inside our apartment, everything looked exactly the same. The wedding photos still smiled from their frames. The throw pillows I'd arranged that morning were still perfectly positioned on our cream-colored sofa. But something fundamental had shifted, like when a patient's vitals suddenly change, and you know everything's about to go sideways. I walked through each room, mentally cataloguing Michael's possessions. His golf clubs in the hall closet, gifts from his mother Margaret, who'd never liked me anyway, his collection of business books on the nightstand, each one promising to unlock the secrets of success and leadership, his expensive cologne on the bathroom counter, the one that used to make me melt, but now just smelled like lies and betrayal. I grabbed a stack of cardboard boxes from our storage closet and got to work. Each item I packed came with its own bitter memory. The watch I'd given him for his last birthday, into the box. The framed photo of us at Niagara Falls from our honeymoon, into the box. His precious coffee maker that he'd insisted we needed but never learned to use properly, definitely into the box. As I worked, my phone started buzzing with missed calls. Michael, of course, probably realizing that his wife wasn't going to fall apart and beg him to come home. I let every call go to voicemail. By midnight, I'd filled 6 boxes with his belongings. I stacked them neatly by the front door, each one labeled in my careful nurse's handwriting. Michael's golf stuff, Michael's books, Michael's bathroom junk. The last box I simply labeled Michael's Dreams. It contained all his business awards and motivational plaques. I was sealing the final box with packing tape when my phone rang. Not Michael this time, his mother, Margaret. Caroline, dear, I just spoke with Michael. There seems to be some sort of misunderstanding. Margaret Bennett was 62 years old and had the personality of a cardiac monitor during a code blue, loud, insistent, and impossible to ignore. She lived in a retirement community in Scottsdale, where she spent her days playing tennis and her evenings calling her sons to critique their life choices. No misunderstanding, Margaret. Michael decided he'd rather live with his coworker than his wife. Pretty straightforward situation. Now, Caroline, marriage requires work from both parties. Perhaps if you'd been more supportive of Michael's career ambitions. His career ambitions? You mean his ambition to sleep with Julia Whitman? There was a pause. Margaret wasn't used to being interrupted, especially not with such blunt language. I'm flying out tomorrow to help sort this mess out. Michael is just going through a phase. All successful men do. Bring holy water, I said, and hung up. I looked around our apartment, my apartment, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for Michael to come home late from another client dinner. I wasn't wondering why he'd suddenly become so protective of his phone, or why he'd started working out obsessively and buying new clothes. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, finally allowing myself to process what had happened. 8 years of marriage, gone in a text message. 8 years of supporting his career, hosting his business dinners, and pretending to laugh at his colleagues' boring stories. 8 years of being the perfect consultant's wife, while he apparently shopped around for an upgrade. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline, our neighbor from down the hall. Saw Michael's car wasn't in the driveway tonight. Everything okay? Caroline had been my friend when we first moved in, but lately she'd become more of a neighborhood gossip coordinator. Still, I was curious to see how quickly news would spread. Michael moved out. We're getting divorced. My phone immediately rang. Caroline, of course. What happened? Was it another woman? I knew something was up when I saw him coming home so late all those nights. It was Julia from his office. Apparently they've been working very closely together. That little blonde thing, I met her at your Christmas party last year. She seemed like trouble. Caroline's concern felt genuine, which surprised me. Maybe I'd underestimated her. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. I feel like I can finally breathe again. And I meant it. As I got ready for bed in the apartment that was now entirely mine, I realized that the tightness in my chest that I'd been carrying for months had disappeared. The constant low-level anxiety about Michael's mood, his work stress, his growing distance, all of it was gone. I fell asleep in the center of our king-size bed, sprawled across both sides like a starfish, and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up with the clarity of purpose that usually came with a medical emergency. I had a list of things to accomplish, and I was going to handle each one with the same methodical precision I used in the cardiac unit. First stop, Washington Federal Bank. I need to remove my husband from our joint accounts and open individual accounts, I told the banker, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, who looked like she'd handled her share of divorce-related financial restructuring. Do you have your identification and account information? I slid the paperwork across her desk. I also need to change the beneficiaries on my retirement accounts and life insurance policies. Patricia nodded approvingly. Smart moves. You'd be surprised how many people forget about those details until it's too late. Within an hour, I'd effectively separated my financial life from Michael's. Every dollar I'd earned, every penny I'd saved, it was all mine now. Michael would have access to exactly half of our joint savings, which seemed more than fair, considering he'd already moved in with his new girlfriend. Next stop, home improvement. I called Tommy Martinez, a locksmith who'd done work for other people in our building. He was a no-nonsense guy in his 50s who ran his own business and didn't ask unnecessary questions. I need all the locks changed today. My husband moved out and I want to make sure he can't get back in. Standard divorce security upgrade, Tommy said matter-of-factly. I can be there in 2 hours. You want the high-security deadbolts or just the regular ones? High security. And Tommy, If a tall guy with brown hair shows up claiming to live there, he doesn't anymore. Got it. I've handled plenty of these situations. Don't worry about it. While I waited for Tommy, I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off for months. Michael had always hated the idea of painting our bedroom accent wall, the coral colour I'd fallen in love with. Too feminine, he'd said. What will people think? Well, now I didn't have to care what people thought. I drove to the hardware store and bought paint, brushes, and drop cloths. The elderly man at the paint counter mixed the coral shade I'd saved on my phone, and I felt a little thrill of rebellion as he handed me the can. Back at the apartment, I moved furniture and laid out drop cloths with the same careful attention I brought to preparing for a surgical procedure. Each brushstroke was deliberate and satisfying. This was my space now, and I could make it look however I wanted. I was halfway through the accent wall when Tommy arrived with his toolbox. Nice colour, he said, examining my paint job. Very cheerful. My ex-husband hated it. Then you definitely picked the right shade. I liked Tommy immediately. While he worked on the locks, I continued painting. The coral was even more beautiful than I'd imagined, warm and vibrant, like a Caribbean sunset. Every stroke covered up another piece of the life I'd shared with Michael. All done, Tommy announced, handing me a set of new keys. These are high-security locks. Even if he somehow got a copy of your old keys, they won't work anymore. Perfect. What do I owe you? $200 for the locks and labor. And here's my card in case you need anything else. Sometimes the exes get creative about trying to get back in. I paid Tommy and gave him a generous tip. As he packed up his tools, I heard voices in the hallway, male voices, one of which I recognized, Michael. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing outside with his younger brother, David, both of them carrying empty boxes. Michael looked tired and disheveled, like he'd slept in his car. David looked uncomfortable, like he'd been dragged into a situation he wanted no part of. Michael tried his key in the lock. When it didn't work, he tried it again, jiggling the handle and pushing against the door. The locks are changed, he called through the door. Caroline, open up. We need to talk about this. I opened the door, but left the security chain engaged, so I could see him, but he couldn't enter. Your stuff is right there, I said, pointing to the boxes I'd stacked in the hallway. Everything's labeled for your convenience. Caroline, please, can we just talk? This whole thing got out of hand. Got out of hand? You moved in with another woman, Michael. That's not something that gets out of hand accidentally. David cleared his throat. Maybe I should wait in the car. No, stay, Michael said. Caroline, David has some good points about how we could work through this. He's been through marriage counseling with Rebecca. I looked at David, who was clearly mortified to be involved in this conversation. Did David's marriage counseling cover adultery or just general communication issues? It wasn't adultery, Michael said quickly. Nothing physical happened until after I moved out. Oh, well, that makes it so much better. You only had an emotional affair while we were married. Very ethical of you. Tommy appeared in the hallway behind Michael and David, having taken his time packing up his tools. He was a big guy, and his presence immediately changed the dynamic of the conversation. Everything okay here, Mrs. Bennett? It's Ms. Davis now, and yes, everything's fine. These gentlemen were just picking up some boxes. Michael looked back at Tommy, then at me. Who is this guy? My locksmith. Tommy, this is my ex-husband Michael and his brother David. Michael, this is Tommy, who installed the new high-security locks that your old keys definitely won't open. The message was clear. Michael was no longer welcome in my home. This is ridiculous, Caroline. Half of everything in that apartment is mine. And half of everything in those boxes is yours. I was very thorough. You'll find your golf clubs, your books, your clothes, your cologne, and all those motivational plaques your mother bought you. David picked up one of the boxes. Come on, Michael. Let's just take this stuff and figure out the rest later. But Michael wasn't ready to give up. What about the furniture? What about the wedding gifts? What about our shared investments? The furniture stays with the apartment, which is in my name. The wedding gifts can be divided through lawyers if you want to be petty about it, and you'll get your half of our shared investments, minus the money you've been spending on Julia, of course. I haven't been spending money on Julia, I laughed. Michael, I handle our finances. I know about the expensive dinners, the hotel rooms, the jewelry purchases. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? His face went red. David looked like he wanted to disappear. Look, I continued, you made your choice. You chose Julia over our marriage. That's fine. But don't expect me to make it easy for you, and don't expect me to pretend this is some kind of mutual decision. Tommy stepped forward slightly. Ma'am, do you want me to help these gentlemen carry their boxes to their car? The offer was polite but firm. Michael got the message. Fine. But this isn't over, Caroline. We have 8 years of shared assets to sort out. Then call my lawyer. I'm sure Julia can recommend one. Michael and David loaded the boxes onto a dolly and headed toward the elevator. I watched them go, feeling lighter with each step they took away from my door. Thanks, Tommy. I owe you another favor. No problem. Like I said, I've seen this kind of thing before. He'll probably try to come back in a few days when he realizes what he's lost. Just don't let him guilt you into anything. After Tommy left, I went back to painting my accent wall. Each brushstroke felt like another step toward reclaiming my life. The coral color was bold and beautiful, nothing like the safe, neutral colors Michael had always preferred. My phone started buzzing with text messages. Caroline from down the hall. Saw Michael and another guy in the hallway with boxes. Are you okay? I texted back, never better. Come over for wine later if you want to see my new paint job. Then a text from Michael. We need to talk about this like adults. Julia says I should fight for half the apartment. I stared at that message for a long moment. Julia was already giving him legal advice. How convenient. I typed back, Julia can say whatever she wants. She's not married to you anymore either, remember? Oh wait, neither am I. Then I blocked his number. 3 days later, I was settling into my new routine as a single woman when the fire alarm in our building went off at 3 a.m. I stumbled out of bed, grabbed my robe, and joined the stream of irritated residents evacuating to the parking lot. False alarm, announced Jim, our building's night security guard. Someone pulled the alarm on the 4th floor, but there's no fire. The 4th floor was my floor. I looked around the crowd of residents and noticed Caroline standing near me, looking suspicious. This is weird, she said. Who pulls a fire alarm in the middle of the night? I had a pretty good idea, but I kept it to myself. As we were allowed back into the building, I noticed Mark, our daytime doorman, talking to Jim near the entrance. Mark worked the day shift, so what was he doing here at 3 a.m? I caught up with him by the elevator. Working late tonight, Mark? Mark was a 46-year-old former Marine who took building security seriously. He'd always been friendly to me, and I got the impression he didn't much like Michael. Got a call from Jim about some guy hanging around the building earlier tonight. Tall brown hair, driving a BMW. Sound familiar? Unfortunately, yes. Thought so. Jim said the guy claimed he lived here, but when Jim asked for his keycard, he got all nervous and drove off. About an hour later, someone pulled the fire alarm. Can you prove it was him? Not legally, but we've got security cameras, and I know how to use them. Want me to keep an eye out? I'd appreciate that, Mark. Thanks. The next morning, I was back at St. Cecilia's Hospital for my regular shift. Working in the cardiac unit required complete focus. There was no room for personal drama when people's lives were literally in your hands. But during my break, I found myself checking my phone more than usual. Dr. Reynolds, our unit supervisor, called me into her office around noon. Caroline, I wanted to talk to you about the head nurse position that's opening up next month. You've been here longer than anyone. Your patient outcomes are excellent, and the other nurses respect you. Are you interested? A promotion, more responsibility, better pay, and official recognition of the work I'd been doing for years. 6 months ago, I would have hesitated, worried about how the increased hours might affect my marriage. Now, the decision was easy. Absolutely. I'd love the opportunity. Great. There's some additional paperwork and training involved, but I think you're ready for it. Congratulations. I left Dr. Reynolds' office feeling energized. My personal life might be in chaos, but my professional life was thriving. For the first time in years, I could make career decisions based solely on what I wanted, not on what would be convenient for Michael's schedule. During lunch, I was eating in the hospital cafeteria when I noticed a familiar blonde figure near the information desk. Julia Whitman, looking out of place in her designer suit and high heels. I watched as she talked to the receptionist, gesturing toward the elevators. She was asking for directions to somewhere in the hospital. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could guess what she was doing here. I finished my lunch and headed back to the cardiac unit, taking a route that would pass by the information desk. As I walked by, I heard Julia ask, "And how would I go about checking on someone's insurance coverage? I'm handling some paperwork for my boyfriend." Her boyfriend, so that's how she was referring to Michael now. I stopped walking and turned around. "Excuse me, are you Julia Whitman?" She looked startled to see me. "Yes, and you are?" "Caroline Davis, Michael's wife. Well, ex-wife, I suppose, since he's living with you now." The color drained from her face. "Oh, I wasn't expecting to run into you here." "What a coincidence. I work here. In the cardiac unit, actually. What brings you to St. Cecilia's?" Michael asked me to check on some insurance information." "How thoughtful of you. I'm sure he appreciates having someone to handle his paperwork now that he doesn't have a wife to do it." Julia looked around nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of our conversation. The hospital lobby was busy, with patients, visitors, and staff moving around us. "Look, I know this situation is awkward." "Awkward? That's an interesting word for it. I would have gone with home-wrecking, but awkward works too." "It's not like that. Michael and I have a genuine connection. We work together. We understand each other's ambitions." "Oh, I'm sure you understand each other very well, especially his ambition to cheat on his wife." Julia's face flushed red. "He wasn't happy in your marriage, Caroline. He told me you two had been growing apart for months." "Did he also tell you that he never mentioned any problems to me? That he went straight from acting like everything was fine to moving in with you?" "Maybe he didn't feel like he could talk to you about his feelings." I laughed, loud enough that several people in the lobby turned to look at us. "His feelings? Julia, the man ended our 8-year marriage via text message. I don't think emotional communication is his strong suit. He was scared. He was a coward, and if you think he won't do the same thing to you when someone younger and more ambitious comes along, you're more naive than I thought." Julia straightened up, trying to regain some dignity. "We're in love, Caroline. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's true." "Love? You've been together for what? A week? 2 weeks? That's not love, Julia. That's just the excitement of getting away with something forbidden. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know that it started while he was married to me. I know that he's been lying to both of us for months, and I know that if he'll cheat with you, he'll cheat on you." Julia looked like she was about to cry, which gave me a perverse sense of satisfaction. "I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. But you should probably think about what kind of man asks his new girlfriend to handle his insurance paperwork at his ex-wife's workplace. That's not romantic, Julia. That's just lazy." She turned and walked quickly toward the exit, her high heels clicking against the hospital's tile floor. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. She was young and ambitious, and she'd made a terrible mistake getting involved with Michael. But that was her problem now, not mine. I went back to work, focusing on my patients and trying to push the encounter out of my mind. But throughout the afternoon, I kept thinking about Julia's words. He wasn't happy in your marriage. Maybe that was true. Maybe Michael had been unhappy for months or even years. But instead of talking to me about it, instead of suggesting counseling or working on our problems together, he'd chosen to have an affair and then abandon our marriage via text message. That wasn't the behavior of an unhappy husband. That was the behavior of a selfish coward. After my shift ended, I drove through the city instead of going straight home. I found myself in the downtown area where Julia lived, in one of those trendy converted warehouse buildings with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. I parked across the street and looked up at the building, wondering which window was hers. Was Michael up there right now, telling her about his terrible ex-wife who wouldn't just disappear quietly? Was he spinning the story to make himself look like the victim? My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "Want to get dinner tonight? I'm buying." I looked at Julia's building one more time, then put my car in drive and headed home. I had better things to do than waste my evening thinking about Michael and his new girlfriend. But as I drove away, I made a mental note of Julia's address, just in case I needed it later. Caroline and I met for dinner at Rosario's, a little Italian place near our apartment building. She'd been surprisingly supportive since Michael moved out, and I was starting to remember why we'd been friends before I got so wrapped up in trying to be the perfect wife. "So, how are you really doing?" she asked over wine and breadsticks. "Better than I expected. I got a promotion at work, I'm finally decorating the apartment the way I want it, and I'm sleeping better than I have in months. And Michael, have you heard from him?" "He's been trying to call, but I blocked his number. His mother flew in from Arizona to try to fix things, but I'm not interested in family mediation." Carolyn laughed. "Margaret Bennett tried to fix your marriage. That woman couldn't fix a broken nail without calling a professional. She thinks Michael is just going through a phase, like cheating on your wife is some kind of midlife crisis hobby." "What about the other woman, Julia?" I told Caroline about the encounter at the hospital, and she shook her head in disbelief. She actually said they were in love, after knowing each other for what, a few months? If that. I think this whole thing started as an office affair that got out of hand, and now they're both trying to convince themselves it's some great romantic love story. Well, let them. You're better off without him. Caroline was right, but I was still angry. Not heartbroken. Angry. Michael had thrown away 8 years of marriage for a workplace fling, and he was acting like I was the unreasonable one for not wanting to discuss it over coffee like civilized adults. The next few days passed quietly. I worked my shifts at the hospital, came home to my coral accent wall and my perfectly arranged furniture, and enjoyed the peace of not having to coordinate my schedule with anyone else's needs. But then Amy, one of the younger nurses in our unit, mentioned something during our Thursday shift that caught my attention. My friend Sarah works at that consulting firm downtown, Bennett and Associates. She said there's been all kinds of drama there lately. One of the senior partners is going through a messy divorce, and he's been bringing his personal problems to work. "Really?" I tried to sound casual. "What kind of problems?" Apparently he's been distracted, missing meetings, and his new girlfriend works there too, so everyone's uncomfortable. Sarah said the whole office is talking about it. Michael was making himself the office gossip. Part of me felt embarrassed that my personal life was being discussed by strangers, but a bigger part of me felt vindicated. His perfect new relationship was already causing problems. That evening, I was relaxing at home when Mark called from the front desk. "Mrs. Davis, there's a woman here asking about you. Says her name is Margaret Bennett." Michael's mother. I'd been wondering when she'd show up. "Send her up, Mark. Thanks for the heads up." 5 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Margaret Bennett standing in the hallway, looking like she'd dressed for a business meeting. She was wearing a cream-colored suit and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression disapproving. "Hello, Margaret. Come in." She walked into my apartment and immediately noticed the coral accent wall. Her face tightened slightly, but she didn't comment. "Caroline, we need to talk about this situation with Michael." "What situation?" "He moved out. He's living with his girlfriend. Seems pretty straightforward to me. He's confused. He's made some poor decisions, but that doesn't mean your marriage has to end. I gestured for her to sit on the couch, but she remained standing. Margaret, he cheated on me. Then he moved in with the other woman. Then he ended our marriage via text message. Those aren't poor decisions. That's a pattern of selfish behavior. Marriage requires forgiveness, Carolyn. Michael is a good man who made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the grocery store. Having an affair is a choice. Margaret's jaw tightened. Perhaps if you'd been more supportive of his career, more understanding of the pressures he was under, more supportive. Margaret, I've spent 8 years hosting his business dinners, attending his company events, and listening to him complain about his job. What exactly should I have done differently? You could have been more encouraging of his ambitions. Michael has always been a visionary. A visionary. He works at a mid-level consulting firm, Margaret. He's not curing cancer or solving world hunger. He helps companies reorganize their filing systems. That's exactly the kind of attitude that drove him away. I stared at her, amazed by her ability to rewrite history. What drove him away was a blonde 20-something who told him he was brilliant and misunderstood. It had nothing to do with me. Julia is just a phase. If you're patient, I'm not going to be patient. I'm going to be divorced. Margaret looked around my apartment again, taking in the changes I'd made. The coral wall, the rearranged furniture, the absence of Michael's belongings. You've certainly moved on quickly. I've moved on appropriately. This is my home now, and I'm making it reflect my taste instead of his. And what about your future? Do you really think you'll find someone else at your age? The question was meant to hurt, but it just made me laugh. Margaret, I'm 34 years old. I have a good career. I own my own home, and I'm finally free to make my own decisions. I'm not worried about my future. Michael still loves you. If Michael loved me, he wouldn't have cheated on me. If he loved me, he would have talked to me about his problems, instead of running to another woman. If he loved me, he wouldn't have ended our marriage with a text message. Margaret sat down on the couch, looking older and more tired than when she'd arrived. I just want my son to be happy. Then you should talk to him about making better choices. But that's between you and him. I'm not responsible for Michael's happiness anymore. She left a few minutes later, and I felt a strange sense of closure. For years I'd tried to win Margaret's approval, to be the daughter-in-law she wanted. Now I realized it had never mattered. She would always see me as the obstacle to Michael's success, never as the woman who'd supported him through 8 years of marriage. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when Mark called from the front desk again. Mrs. Davis, that guy is back, the one with the BMW. He's in the parking lot, and he looks pretty agitated. I looked out my window and saw Michael sitting in his car, talking animatedly on his phone. Even from 4 floors up, I could see that he looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. Thanks for letting me know, Mark. I'll be down in a few minutes. I took my time getting ready, then headed downstairs to the parking lot. Michael saw me coming and got out of his car. Caroline, we need to talk. No, we don't. We need to communicate through lawyers from now on. This is ridiculous. We're adults. We can work this out. Michael, you moved in with another woman. What exactly is there to work out? I made a mistake. I got caught up in the excitement of someone new, someone who understood my work, someone who told you how brilliant and misunderstood you were. He looked surprised that I'd guessed so accurately. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Julia made you feel special and important, and you threw away our marriage for the ego boost. Maybe at first, but now I realize what I've lost. You're my wife, Caroline. We have a history together. Had a history, past tense. Michael ran his hands through his hair, looking desperate. What do you want me to do? I'll end things with Julia. I'll move back home. We can go to counseling. I don't want you to do anything, Michael. I want you to leave me alone and let me get on with my life. But what about everything we built together? Our plans, our future? What plans? You never included me in your plans. You made decisions about your career, your schedule, your priorities, and expected me to adapt. Well, now I'm making my own plans, and they don't include you. I started walking toward my car, but Michael followed me. Caroline, please. I know I screwed up, but we can fix this. No, we can't. And you know what the worst part is? I don't even want to fix it anymore. For the first time in years, I'm happy. I'm making decisions based on what I want, not what's convenient for your career. I'm decorating my home the way I like it. I'm focusing on my own ambitions instead of supporting yours. So, this is about revenge? This isn't about revenge, Michael. This is about self-respect. I deserve better than a husband who cheats on me and then expects me to be grateful when he offers to come back. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see him watching me go, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he looked like he was finally beginning to understand what he'd lost. But it was too late. Some hearts, once they stop beating, can't be restarted. 2 weeks later, I was celebrating my official promotion to head nurse at Martini's, a trendy rooftop bar downtown. Caroline had insisted on taking me out to mark the occasion, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about my future. To Caroline Davis, head of cardiac nursing and newly single woman about town, Caroline toasted, raising her cosmopolitan. To new beginnings, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. The bar was crowded with young professionals unwinding after work. The city skyline stretched out below us, twinkling with lights as the sun set. I felt sophisticated and independent, like the kind of woman I'd always wanted to be but had somehow lost along the way during my marriage. We were halfway through our second round of drinks when I noticed a familiar blonde figure near the bar. Julia Whitman, looking less polished than usual. Her hair was slightly messy, her makeup wasn't perfect, and she was drinking what looked like straight vodka. "Don't look now, but your replacement is here," Caroline said, following my gaze. "She doesn't look very happy. Trouble in paradise, maybe?" As if she could sense us talking about her, Julia turned and saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the crowded bar. Then she picked up her drink and started walking toward our table. "This should be interesting," Caroline murmured. Julia stopped in front of our table, swaying slightly. She was definitely drunk. Well, if it isn't the bitter ex-wife. "Hello, Julia, you look tired." "I'm fine, better than fine. I'm in love with your ex-husband." "Congratulations. How's that working out for you?" Julia's face flushed red. "It's working out great. Michael and I have a real connection. We understand each other." "I'm sure you do. Nothing brings people together like mutual adultery." "It wasn't adultery. We didn't sleep together until after he left you." "Oh, right. You just had an emotional affair while he was married. Much more ethical." Julia took a large gulp of her drink. "You don't know anything about our relationship." "I know that Michael has a pattern of running away from problems instead of dealing with them. I know that he's selfish and immature. And I know that you're about to find out both of those things the hard way. He's not selfish. He's ambitious. He has vision." I laughed. "Vision? Julia, the man couldn't envision doing his own laundry. What kind of vision are we talking about here?" "He's going to start his own consulting firm. We're going to be partners, business and personal." "With what money? Half of our assets won't be enough to start a business. And I doubt his current firm is going to give him a great reference after he turned the office into his personal dating pool." Julia's confidence wavered slightly. "He has investors lined up." "Does he? Or does he have ideas about investors that he's never actually approached?" "You're just jealous because he chose me over you." "Julia, I wouldn't take him back if he came crawling on his hands and knees. You did me a favor by taking him off my hands." "That's not true. Michael said you've been calling him, begging him to come back." I stared at her in amazement. "Michael said what?" "Julia, I blocked his number 2 weeks ago. The only contact we've had was when he ambushed me in my building's parking lot. He said you've been driving by my apartment, stalking us. I've been to your neighborhood exactly once, and that was before I knew you lived there. Michael is lying to you. Julia looked confused, like she was trying to process information that didn't match what she'd been told. Caroline leaned forward. Honey, if he's already lying to you about his ex-wife, what else do you think he's lying about? He's not lying. He loves me. Maybe he does, but love doesn't pay rent, and it doesn't fund business ventures. What happens when the excitement of your forbidden romance wears off, and you're just two people trying to make a relationship work in the real world? Julia finished her drink and slammed the glass down on our table. You're pathetic. Sitting here drinking with your sad little friend, trying to convince yourself that you're better off alone. I am better off alone. I'm better off than I was with a cheating husband. And I'm definitely better off than you're going to be when Michael gets bored and starts looking for his next upgrade. That's not going to happen. It already happened, Julia. It happened to me. What makes you think you're special? Julia looked like she was about to cry or throw her empty glass at me. Instead, she turned and walked quickly toward the exit, bumping into several people on her way out. Well, that was dramatic, Caroline said. She's starting to figure out what she got herself into. Think she'll dump him? I think she'll try to make it work until the reality becomes too obvious to ignore. But Michael doesn't know how to be in a real relationship. He only knows how to be in the exciting beginning part. We finished our drinks and headed home, but the encounter with Julia had left me feeling unsettled. Not because I was jealous. I genuinely didn't want Michael back, but because I could see the future playing out, and it wasn't going to be pretty for anyone involved. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when my phone rang. An unknown number, but I answered it anyway. Caroline, it's David, Michael's brother. Hi, David. What can I do for you? I wanted to apologize for the other day when Michael and I came to get his stuff. That was awkward for everyone. It's not your fault your brother doesn't know how to handle conflict like an adult. That's actually why I'm calling. He's not doing well. He's been drinking too much. He's having problems at work, and I think his relationship with Julia is falling apart. I'm sorry to hear that, but it's not my problem anymore. I know, but he's my brother, and I'm worried about him. He keeps talking about how he made a mistake, how he wants to fix things with you. David, Michael made his choice. He chose Julia over our marriage. I'm not interested in being his backup plan when things don't work out with her. What if he ended things with Julia? What if he got counseling and really worked on himself? I sat down on my couch, looking at the coral accent wall that Michael had hated so much. David, I appreciate that you're trying to help your brother, but he didn't just cheat on me. He lied to me for months. He made me question my own instincts when I suspected something was wrong, and then he ended our marriage via text message. Those aren't the actions of someone who made a mistake. Those are the actions of someone who doesn't respect me or our relationship. People can change. Maybe they can. But I don't owe Michael the opportunity to prove it. I've moved on, and I'm happy. I have a new promotion at work. I'm decorating my home the way I want it, and I'm making plans that don't involve accommodating someone else's schedule and priorities. There was a long pause. I understand. I hate seeing him like this. Then encourage him to get professional help. Encourage him to figure out why he sabotaged his marriage and how to avoid doing it again in the future. But don't encourage him to think that I'm going to be waiting for him when he gets his act together. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the conversation. Part of me did feel sorry for Michael. He'd thrown away a stable, loving marriage for the excitement of an affair, and now he was discovering that excitement wasn't enough to build a real relationship on. But I wasn't responsible for his happiness anymore. For 8 years, I'd tried to be the perfect wife, supporting his career and adapting to his needs. Now it was time to focus on my own life and my own goals. I looked around my apartment, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The coral wall was beautiful. The furniture was arranged exactly the way I liked it. There were no golf clubs cluttering the hallway, no business books scattered on every surface, no expensive cologne making the bathroom smell like false promises. This was my space now, and I was going to make the most of it. 3 months after Michael moved out, I was settling into my new life as a single, successful woman. The promotion to head nurse had come with increased responsibilities and better pay, and I was thriving in the leadership role. My colleagues respected my expertise, my patients trusted my care, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The drama with Michael and Julia had mostly died down, though Caroline occasionally updated me on neighborhood gossip. Apparently, Michael had been seen moving boxes out of Julia's building, and Julia had been spotted at various bars around town, usually looking unhappy and slightly drunk. I was working a late shift at the hospital when Amy, one of the nurses I supervised, mentioned that she'd heard something interesting. My friend who works at Bennett & Associates said that Michael Bennett got fired last week. I looked up from the patient chart I was reviewing. Fired? For what? Apparently his work performance had been declining for months, and then he had some kind of breakdown in a client meeting, started yelling about how nobody appreciated his vision or understood his potential. That sounds like Michael. The firm asked him to take a leave of absence, but he quit instead, said he was going to start his own company and show them what real success looked like. I shook my head. Michael had always had grandiose ideas about his own importance, but losing his job was going to make those fantasies much harder to maintain. What about Julia? Still works there, but apparently she's been telling everyone that she barely knew Michael and that she had no idea he was having personal problems. So Julia was distancing herself from Michael now that his life was falling apart. I couldn't say I was surprised. That weekend, I was grocery shopping when I ran into Margaret Bennett in the produce section. She looked older and more tired than the last time I'd seen her, and she was clearly uncomfortable running into me. Hello, Caroline. Margaret, how are you? I'm fine. I'm actually in town visiting Michael. How is he doing? She hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell me. He's going through a difficult time. He lost his job, and his relationship with that girl ended badly. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Or are you pleased that things didn't work out for him? I considered the question seriously. I'm not pleased that he's suffering, Margaret, but I'm not surprised that his choices had consequences. He realizes now that he made a mistake. Leaving you, getting involved with Julia, all of it was a mistake. Maybe it was, but it was his mistake to make. He wants to see you, to apologize, to try to make things right. I looked at Margaret, this woman who had never liked me, but was now practically begging me to give her son another chance. Margaret, I appreciate that you love Michael and want him to be happy, but he can't undo what he did by apologizing. He can't rebuild trust that he destroyed, and he can't expect me to fix his life for him. So that's it. 8 years of marriage mean nothing. 8 years of marriage meant everything to me. That's why his betrayal hurt so much, and that's why I can't just pretend it didn't happen. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. He's my son, Caroline. I know he's not perfect, but he's a good man who made bad choices. Then help him learn from those choices and become a better person, but don't ask me to sacrifice my happiness and self-respect to make his life easier. I left Margaret standing in the produce section and finished my shopping. As I drove home, I thought about the conversation and realized that I felt genuinely sorry for her. She was watching her son's life fall apart, and she was desperate to fix it. But some things couldn't be fixed, and some consequences couldn't be avoided. That evening, I was relaxing at home when Mark called from the front desk. Mrs. Davis, there's a man here asking to see you. Says his name is Michael Bennett. I'd been expecting this call for weeks. Tell him I'm not available, Mark, and if he doesn't leave voluntarily, call security. Will do, but he looks pretty rough, if you don't mind me saying, like he hasn't slept in days. That's not my problem anymore. 20 minutes later, Mark called back. He's gone, but he left something for you. An envelope. Bring it up when you have a chance. Thanks, Mark. The envelope contained a handwritten letter, 3 pages of Michael's messy handwriting, full of apologies and explanations and promises to change. He wrote about how he'd realized that Julia was nothing compared to me, how he'd thrown away the best thing in his life for a meaningless fling, how he would do anything to earn my forgiveness. I read the entire letter, then folded it up and put it in a drawer. It was too little, too late. Michael had had 8 years to appreciate what we had together, and he'd chosen to throw it away for the excitement of someone new. Now that his life was falling apart, he wanted me to rescue him, but I wasn't interested in being anyone's savior. The next week, I was attending a hospital board meeting when I received an urgent text from Caroline. Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Michael showed up and is causing a scene. Can you come? I finished the board meeting and drove home to find chaos in our building's community room. Michael was standing in front of a room full of residents, gesturing wildly and talking loudly about injustice and betrayal. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, his eyes red and wild. And she turned everyone against me, he was saying as I walked in. My own wife, the woman I supported for 8 years, has poisoned this entire community with lies about me. The room fell silent as people noticed me enter. Michael turned around and saw me, his face lighting up with a mixture of hope and desperation. Caroline, thank God you're here. Tell them the truth. Tell them that this is all a misunderstanding. I looked around the room at my neighbors, people I'd lived near for years, people who knew me as the quiet, responsible nurse who worked long hours and never caused trouble. What exactly would you like me to tell them, Michael? Tell them that we can work this out, that you're willing to give our marriage another chance. I can't tell them that, because it's not true. Michael's face crumpled. Caroline, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can start over. Michael, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to move in with another woman. You chose to end our marriage via text message. Those weren't accidents or misunderstandings. They were deliberate decisions. I was confused. You were selfish, and now that your affair didn't work out the way you planned, now that you've lost your job and your girlfriend has dumped you, you want me to rescue you. But I'm not going to do that. The room was completely silent. Michael looked around at the faces staring at him, and I could see the moment when he realized that no one was sympathetic to his situation. This isn't fair, he said quietly. No, it's not fair. It wasn't fair when you cheated on me. It wasn't fair when you lied to me for months. It wasn't fair when you ended our marriage without even trying to work on our problems. But life isn't fair, Michael. Actions have consequences, and these are yours. Michael stood there for a moment longer, swaying slightly, looking like a man who had finally run out of options. Then he turned and walked out of the community room, leaving behind a room full of uncomfortable neighbors and 8 years of shared history. I watched him go and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not satisfaction or vindication, just peace. The chapter of my life that had included Michael Bennett was finally, definitively closed. Caroline walked over and put her arm around my shoulders. You okay? I'm perfect, I said, and I meant it. As the crowd dispersed and people returned to their apartments, I looked around the community room where I'd just publicly ended my marriage once and for all. In a few hours, I would go upstairs to my apartment with its coral accent wall and perfectly arranged furniture. I would pour myself a glass of wine and sit on my couch, planning my next career move and thinking about the vacation I was going to take with my promotion bonus. For the first time in years, my future was entirely my own. I had no one to accommodate, no one to support, no one to make excuses for. I was free to make decisions based solely on what would make me happy and fulfilled. Michael had given me the greatest gift possible when he walked out of our marriage. He had given me back myself, I walked out of the community room and headed toward the elevator, leaving the chaos and drama behind me. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored wall. A successful, independent woman who had survived betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. The cardiac unit had taught me that some hearts could be restarted after they stopped beating. But sometimes, the healthiest thing to do was to let the old heart die and grow a new one in its place. Mine was beating strong and steady, and it belonged entirely to me.